Generally, before we turn the recorder on, we get a kind of an idea of where things are going. Um, and so it's good to talk for a little bit first. Um, this is your, what, second or third call?
Third call, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Um, Generally, the practice of anapanasati has been around, well documented in the suttas for a long time. But it appears that uh, while the practice is, um, let us say, a um, vipassana practice, anapanasati is kind of both samatha and vipassana together at the same time. And that um, in Burma there was a technique uh, given by to the name of Mahasi Sayadaw, which has mostly the noting as possibly their hallmark or their number one way of expressing it would be the noting method.
Hmm.
And yet, one of the things that I have seen over time is that the Western students, while noting, will not do anything about it other than continue to noting. So when they note that they're in a state of ordinary mind, if they notice that they're in a state of uh, uh, dull mind, for instance, they'll do something like just dull mind, dull mind. All right,
Yeah,
and
yeah, it
that
may not. Oh, so-
and so this seems to be also the practice not only through the Mahasi, but books that have been read by Western teachers. TMI is very common, and that this is one of the things that seems to be missing in those practices that are rooted in the Mahasi method is very, very clear in a number of suttas, and that is that the hindrances are hindrances to be removed, not hindrances to be watched, noted, coddled, and left to their own devices.
mhm.
This is a major part of the training of the mind, um, because if you're leaving the hindrances in the mind and just noting them, that's not much of a practice.
Yeah, I mean, you get in tune with the bad feelings. I mean, you just
Well,
get better at seeing the bad feelings.
but we've been in the habit of bad feelings our whole lives, so we're not making much progress.
Mhm.
Everything then about the sutras, including the Anapanasati Sutta, and the way that it's laid out, and also the Eightfold Noble Path, and most specifically what is right effort. But then in a number of other suttas, it's when it's talking about specifically the hindrances, it makes sure that the students understand that the hindrances are hindrances to be removed as soon as they're seen, as soon as they're recognized. Um, in Sutta number 39, it has um, a group of 5 analogies. These analogies don't fit exactly one for one with each of the hindrances, so that there's an analogy for this hindrance, an analogy for this one. Whether these analogies are like everything about the hindrances, though certain analogies work really well for certain hindrances. And so let's talk about those 5 analogies because then that will give the students an understanding of just how important and why we need to remove these hindrances.
Okay.
So the first hindrance is generally referred to as being sick, and that everybody's been sick from time to time, and you know that let us say you've been sick and you go to bed sick and you wake up the next morning and you feel fine. You feel good the next day.
Hmm.
Okay? Or that if you go into a hospital, when you go into the hospital, you go for a reason and you feel really sick. So, whether it's one day or 2 or 5 days later, when you get out of the hospital, you feel really relieved to get out of the hospital, as well as that you like it that you're feeling good enough to get out of the hospital.
So the hindrance is like the feeling of like not like attachment to health or like feeling like you're unwell.
Feeling unwell, feeling sick. If there was one hindrance that would fit with that, it would be uh, drowsiness and or um, the the Pali words have been translated into ancient English, almost biblical language of sloth and torpor, so that it would fit, I guess, with the seven deadly sins.
Hmm.
Um, Torpor is easy. That's drowsiness, sleepiness, dullness, tiredness. Uh, but sloth has a whole lot more of a doubtful quality to it, uh, in the sense of why bother or what's the point. Uh, and that this can also be referred to kind of as laziness. But in this sense, the sloth is the one who is not taking the right effort that it takes.
So it can be also like thinking like you can't do something or like doubting your ability or just like
That
feeling like it's not worth it to do
mm,
something because of the outcome will be bad or something like that.
exactly so, exactly. So you doubt your ability to do it. You doubt your ability that it can't be done. That we have the feeling that we can't do it on our own,
Hmm.
etc., like that. So um, the the hindrances, then, one analogy would be that you get that you're sick. Another one would be that you're tired, or that what's the point? Okay, so the second analogy is like being in jail, that you can't go where you want to go. And Bhikkhu Buddhadasa actually has a small book by the name of Prison of Light. And that what the prison is it's the hindrances. That's our prison, because it defines who we are, it defines where we can go, it defines so many things that are very much like hindrances, in the sense that there's a part of the mind that winds up being our own prison guard.
Okay, so like putting up barriers, being like, okay, I can't go anywhere because of like this life circumstance, or like I can't be happy because of like X, Y, and Z or something like that.
Exactly right. You can't go and do what you want to do because you're afraid, or that you don't feel adequate, or that you tear up the place, or something like that. And so, being free from the hindrances is then very much like being out of jail, so that you're not confined. And most specifically, the important quality about jail is that it's not just that you're physically encumbered by the walls, but that prison is a mindset.
Hmm.
And part of that mindset is you've got to go around doing what you were told to do. Okay. Uh, Sigmund Freud, uh, in his research, discovered this, and the Buddha knew about it also. Eric Berne then changed the label of it, but it became part of the foundation of the psychological modality called transactional analysis. And TA is the study of interactions between two or three people in small groups. Like,
Hmm.
for instance, a TA therapist is then his job is to analyze the transactions between he and his client. Okay, so uh, within TA, uh, watching, observing, noting what's happening in the moment between two people is a most important aspect of TA from this very name. Within that, Eric Berne had three ego states that correspond exactly to the three ego states of Sigmund Freud. He has made it useful by changing the language, but it's good to look back at the old language too.
And that's just for this one analogy
Yes,
of feeling
this
like in
is
the cage.
right. This is what we call. Well, I'm showing you how this works psychologically.
Hmm.
These three ego states are called parent, adult, and child. The child ego state is the more natural ego state. It's where all of our feelings come from. All of the feelings of a young child, again, are what we experience as feelings when we're grown up. But we have other layers besides that child ego state. We also have a parent ego state, which is where we store all of our learned behavior. Even our language is built into there and all of our concepts. But this parent ego state is the voice that goes around telling us what to do all the time.
Okay, so it's like you need to do this to, or
Hmm.
like in
Yeah, the
as an
alarm
adult you
just
have to
went
do
off.
this
Go
thing, right?
turn the alarm off.
Gotcha.
Uh,
Okay. In the
or
child ego state, that's the like more freer one that wants to go do
well,
like what's
the,
enjoyable, or
yes, the child is based in feelings. And when we are little children, most of the time a little child is in good feelings. They play with their little trucks and they're curious about things. But one of the things that we do in our society with children, Ken, is we tell them to stop having fun and do what you're told to do.
hmm.
Learn your ABCs, go to school, clean your room, pick your toys up. Okay, so the child hears all of that language from the parents and the teachers in the vicinity, and that's what then builds up over time this parent ego state. So instead of your mother now telling you to go clean your room, you're telling that yourself
Hmm.
because you picked up her language or you picked up her style. This is what we mean by the prison guard. So
Okay.
we're in prison, and not only are we subject to the walls of the prison or our boundaries, we're also subject to being told what to do and not like it.
Okay.
Okay,
So yeah.
go ahead.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
So the next analogy is the analogy of being being a servant or being an employee. In the sutras, the analogy is about that the servant has to get up before the master. He has to lay out the clothes for the master. He has to then, being the last one to bed after the master retires, now the servant can go and have a little bit of life as his own. But mostly the servant's life is not doing what he wants to do. He's doing what he was ordered to do or told to do.
Hmm.
Okay, and so then being free from that hindrance is very much like being free from uh, the schedule or being free from the daily work. Now you can see that in fact in one's life that though excuse me, though the society has got it set up so that we are told things such as if you don't work, you don't eat. Basically, um, we have jobs, and we're told because we're told to have jobs. We do what we're told to do, and that you could go so far as to say that our credit card or the purchases that we have made is now the boss.
Okay, so by like acquiring things that we feel we need to maintain, or like having a relationship with the things that we acquire, like
Hmm.
that relationship kind of puts us like in a way that's kind of beholden to them.
Right.
Can I
Especially if you want more. Now you got to go work to get more.
How's that different than the last one? I guess I'm a little unclear. So we've got like
They're very
the
similar because they're pointing at the same psychological state of mind that we're in prison or that we have to do what we're told to do, and that our time is not our own. Not only is our physical boundary and our behavior, but our time structuring is no longer our own because now we have to work to get
so
things.
the jail one's more, I think, like going back to the TA or the I forget the what it was, it like technical analysis or what was it, something analysis,
Transaction, transaction.
transactional analysis. That's more like the rules that are imposed on you by your parents or like the by society. That's like you must do like this in order to be a successful like member of society, or like these are the rules that you have to follow like as a human. And then like going on to the next one of like the servant mentality, that's where like either with can it be either with a person or like items where we think we have to do certain things in order to fill our obligation to that.
Right.
Okay.
So you can see how then uh, the hindrance of wanting things,
Hmm.
and wanting things that we don't have, put us in the position of having to work to go get those things.
Because then we're seeking for that thing. We're no longer doing things for ourselves. We're doing things to like acquire that like
Right.
item.
Right. Because in fact, you could feel happy without that new whiz bang, but because we want the whiz bang, now I've got to go out and work to get that whiz bang. And once
Hmm.
I get that whiz bang, now I've spent all of this work. I've got the whiz bang, but I'm still not happy.
Is this analogy strictly towards things or like possessions?
It's about everything, including ideas.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So it could be like also my employer relationship where I think I have to do these things. Well, yeah, I mean, I guess because I mean, there's still just like mind artifacts. They're just still things we think about. So yeah,
Hmm.
if we feel like we need to toil in order to like get something like external to happen, that makes sense.
Exactly so. Yes. Will we go around toiling for delusionary reasons? One of the delusionary reasons is that if you don't work, you don't eat. And
Hmm.
that's where they kind of got you. You could think of this last one of being a servant, um, could be something in the sense of being a slave, with slavery being locked up, chained. But now what's happened is that our wallet or the the folding money becomes our chain.
Hmm.
That, that we're not chained down with physical chains to be a slave. We're 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 chained by the paycheck.
Yeah, because we feel this need in order to acquire that thing or like
Mhm.
acquire that object. So we have to do the things to get that, even if it goes against, or even if we don't particularly like need it
Uh-huh.
or anything like that.
All right. So we've gotten three of them. The next one is debt. Being in debt. I have been in debt several times in my life, and every time the whole point about that was to get it paid off,
Hmm.
um, to pay off for the mortgage of a building, to pay it off twice as fast, to get it down, to get it over with. Generally, buying cars for cash. If I don't have the cash, you don't buy the car.
Hmm.
Um, this was something that was instilled uh, back in the 1950s with my dad, but nowadays credit is really easy, and that many people are really, really locked up in debt. So I don't know whether you're in debt or not, but I could ask you in the form of, wouldn't it be marvelous if you were free from debt? Do you see how valuable it is to not owe anybody anything?
Yeah, this is certainly something I value. Yeah. Yeah, not
Right.
owing, not being beholden. Like it's like you've wanted that object so bad that you decided to um I don't know, legally legally let it like force you into toiling away.
Hmm. So many things that we do psychologically is to pay off some sort of mental debt. An
Okay,
example
so
of
debt's not strictly monetary. Sorry,
in
sorry
this
to
in
interrupt.
this case now, no, the physical being in debt is merely an analogy for what the hindrances of the mind are,
Okay.
in the sense that the debt now is like an old problem of the past that we now feel obligated to fix.
Hmm.
So we run around rummaging in the past to find objects to fix, and then we make plans on it to fix in the future. But when we're free from debt, then there's nothing broken that needs to be fixed.
And that could pertain to our relationships with other people, where maybe somebody does a favor for us, and then maybe we feel like we need to do something for them in the future.
That's one of the ways of looking at it, but also you owe someone a debt simply by being in an argument with them.
What's the debt in that situation?
Well, you feel bad and they feel bad, and now you feel bad that they feel bad.
Yeah, that's really true. Yeah, yeah, I felt that before, where you feel bad that you got them mad, and then you need to be extra nice, or you need to make it up to them or something
Make
because you
it
feel
up to
bad
them.
for it. Yeah.
Precisely. You got to pay back, okay? So the whole
Hmm.
quality then of payback is built into that issues of obligations. And so you can see how that whole mentality then is a mental hindrance for you to be in a good state.
Hmm.
The last one is the analogy of having gone on a journey or a long trip. I think in the sutras it points out something like a caravan where you're going through the wilderness and that you've got all your possessions like a merchant, and then you wind up coming home or to an oasis or to a restaurant or to getting it home. And once we get home, then we can rest.
Hmm.
We can unload the camels. All of our goods are safe. Okay. So I don't know if you've done any real traveling or not, but the past few years when I've gone traveling, it would be like to go get a visa on the other island, which meant that I would catch the boat. Uh, and here's the boat. People getting in line to go board the boat. They've got all of this baggage. They've got a huge backpack, then they've got a smaller backpack to carry in front, and then they're pulling along a stroller, kind of another suitcase full of stuff.
Hmm.
Um, when one is encumbered like that traveling, we have to constantly be on vigil, constantly being on guard. We have to watch that luggage. We can't just leave it someplace at a restaurant, say, to go check on our tickets. You know, you gotta, if you're going to check on the tickets, you got to take all of that stuff with you. It's quite an encumbrance with a lot of baggage.
So the
And
baggage,
so
it's not the journey that's the problem, it's the baggage in this
it's the
scenario, it's the
back,
things you carry around with you.
the traveling itself, just moving around is enough on its own, but carrying baggage too, that's the burden.
Hmm.
Hmm. Seem to be catching a cold this morning.
Oh no.
So, um, this whole idea then of these five analogies, this last one being um, feeling relieved to finally get home, or relieved when we're out of debt, or relieved to be finished with our servitude. Like at
The,
the end of the day, that we feel relieved. Oh, finally I can go home. Finally I
that
don't have to.
feeling,
Yeah, the
that
feeling.
feeling of relief is like a hindrance.
No, the feeling of relief is like being free from the hindrance.
Okay, got you. Yeah. But the feeling of carrying around luggage on that journey is then gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, that's not relief, carrying around all that luggage, but getting home finally.
Hmm.
Generally, what happens when people get home is that they feel they sit down in a chair or they lay down on the bed and they have a big exhaustive out breath.
Yeah.
And now, after carrying all of that luggage, all of that distance, the one thing they do not want to do right now is open and unpack that luggage.
Hmm.
They just want to leave it as luggage so that they're, because they brought it home, it's good now. Okay, that sense of relief of setting it down. Also, getting out of jail. That's quite a relief.
Hmm.
And getting healthy after having been sick. That's a relief. So a lot of the qualities then of being free from the hindrances is a sense of relief.
So we sit down to or sit down to meditate, and we notice a hindrance, and we want to toss it out.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I guess like how do we notice those hindrances? Because those seem pretty, like, I'm not sure if I could sit down and see, kind of the rules or like kind of that parent role or anything like that. How do we get to the point where we can see like, oh yeah, I'm
Okay.
like operating under these rules that I can't see?
The first step then would be that we need an anchor to get started. And so we use the breath as that anchor, and we
Hmm.
use it in a very anchoring kind of way. Um, when we say an anchor, imagine that a ship, um, when it's anchored down, it may go all over the area based upon currents and wind and all kinds of things, but it's not going to go very far.
The anchor's there to keep the
Right.
boat in place, like it'll pull it back if it
Not
drifts too far.
necessarily in place because anchors, in fact, they're
They drag on the
not to get off
bottom.
into in too much history, but anchors have had a history of how they're shaped so that they can do the job of actually anchoring because it's quite possible for the old style anchor that the pirates had would just scrape along the bottom and the boat would drift and pull the anchor along the bottom with it. And
Okay.
so they
Yeah.
began to develop anchors that would really dig in. Okay,
Oh
dig
wait, so they develop anchors that dig in so they don't drift away.
right. It's not like just throwing a rock overboard that's got a rope tied to it because that ship will drag that rock
It has to
across
be
the
strong.
bottom. Hmm. Um, and not only that, but uh, the the more shallow the water, then the bigger uh, the berth will be for that ship being pulled around. So an anchor really has to dig in.
Hmm.
And once it digs right in, then that ship can't pull it so much. This is what you have in the modern anchor. That's why modern Navy anchors have the structure that they do. Is the way that they're designed is that when they're drug along, they'll dig right in so that it'll stop.
Hmm.
Okay. This is actually quite a good analogy then for using the breath as an anchor for our meditation because we actually want that anchor to dig in and to help us stop the mind from
Hmm.
wandering around. So in normal life, without doing any anapanasati or any practice at all, it very much is like our ship of life or our ship of the mind is just tossed by the waves, thrown this, that, and the other way. Whatever wind comes by, it blows us and off we go. But if we've got this anchor, we can add a great deal of stability to our life.
Hmm.
Okay, so Anapanasati then starts with mindfulness of breathing, which means we're going to start watching the breath. Now, the story goes, and in fact, I would say that the the hallmark or the very best quality of the Goenka retreat is Goenka's expression: when the mind wanders away from the breath, Never mind, start again. Okay, this is that quality that we recognize that the mind has wandered away from the breath. So that's the first thing.
So can we say if the mind is wandering away from the breath, then there is hindrance?
No, we can say that there are hindrances there all of the time until the meditator begins to get some skill. And that these hindrances, I'm going to define them as to two different qualities, banal and tragic.
Hmm.
Banal would be junk thoughts,
Okay.
okay? But they're still hindrance in the sense that they hinder us from being in a good state. It's kind of a blah state. And
Hmm.
we're just sitting and kind of waiting and let the mind wander away. So the new practice then is to use the breath as an anchor. And what we mean by that is that it's going to be an anchor that's going to be digging in. A lot of people, when they start to meditate, they think, oh, watching the breath means whatever the breath is doing, I just have to kind of notice it and kind of watch it. But that's the same thing as the anchor not catching hold. And so the mind will continue to drift.
I might be reading into the metaphor a little bit too much, but like, what's it digging into?
The
Like, it's
digging into it is learning to control the breath. Okay, the
okay. So
digging
keeping
in
our
means
attention on the breath.
keeping it on the breath in the sense that this is going to be a long, deep breath, an
Hmm.
in breath. So we note each breath as is it in or out, and what's the quality of it. Mostly we're going to be working with long breath. So
Hmm.
is this a long, deep breath? Is this a long out breath? Is this a long, deep breath? Is this a long out breath? That
Hmm.
gives 2 points of sati. The point of sati is to know that this is I'm incoming, deep incoming breath, and to note this is a long out breath in the form of maybe a sigh, the
Okay.
quality of a sigh. As
So
I pop,
knowing like we're anchored, like when we're watching the or when we're breathing, we're knowing that we're in an deep in breath, and we're knowing that we're in a deep out breath.
right.
Okay.
Okay, so by doing that, that begins to put the mind to work. And what we're doing here is we're making the mind fit for work.
Hmm.
And the way that we're doing that is by uh, taking these long, deep breaths, energizing the body, and focusing the mind then on the breathing means that now when the hindrances come, they've got to come to disturb what you were doing, which was watching the breath. So now the hindrance will come, but the boat is not going to be dragged by that hindrance because we are now locked in with that anchor that's dug its way in. So now that we're actually watching that in breath to make sure that it's an in breath and an out breath, um, with that in breath and out breath, with a long, slow breathing of maybe 10 to 12 seconds per breath, there's actually quite a lot of stuff to happen in that period of time. The mind is really fast and it will sneak away really quickly, and or um, uh, it also gives us an opportunity to pay attention to quite a lot of stuff. But in fact, anapanasati is a complete practice in the sense that it works with the body, it works with the feelings, it works with the mind, it works with the mind objects, to where many different meditation systems work with only one, and perhaps the only one that they work with is not any of these four.
So
And
how does it work with the feelings? Is that like so you take the time, it takes a long time to take a deep in breath, take a deep out breath, so there's a lot of room for
note
thoughts.
a lot of room for noticing how you feel, to notice what the mind is doing, if the mind is trying to run away or is it settled. Okay. With this technique, then, that's where that expression that the Buddha uses, aha, I see you, Mara.
Hmm.
So while we're taking those long, deep breaths, if the thought comes back, that hindrance, we can see it, then we can deal with it directly. If that thought or hindrance comes back and we're not mindful of it, then the the mind will just be drug away by it.
Okay, so yeah, when I notice the hindrance and I say, "Aha, I see you, Mara," that's the anchor pulling me back, pulling the boat back into the correct position, or not the correct, preventing it
Well,
from drifting away too far,
or at least it's not drifting on. It doesn't. It
not
does
drifting
that.
on.
The drifting doesn't happen. It doesn't go there. Aha! I see you, Myra. Means that you're not going to be able to pull me um, off of uh,
And
my anchored meditation
then you
technique.
can focus on, or then you can bring yourself back to, knowing that you're in an in breath, knowing that you're in an out breath,
Hmm.
back to the meditation, the object of meditation.
Right. Okay. Now, um, being free from the hindrance or noticing the hindrance and throwing it out is actually the word that I was using was a relief.
Hmm.
It really feels good to let go of that hindrance. This is why the Buddha states the first jhana as um, the the rapture and or the piti and the sukha, or the rapture and the pleasure that's born of the seclusion of the freedom from these hindrances. This is
Okay.
a major, major teaching of the Buddha, and it's surprising that so many Westerners don't get that because they think that their job is to watch the hindrances. Where, oh no, your job is to see them clearly enough that they are hindrances so that you can throw them out. Now, an easy way to start identifying those hindrances is that anything that has to do with something that's not happening right here, right now. So, if you think about a person who is not right here, right now, in front of you, then you can consider that a hindrance. If you're thinking about your job and you're not right here, right now at your job, then that would be a hindrance.
So
If you
when
think
we're
about going to the bank but you're not actually going to the bank, then sitting here in meditation thinking about going to the bank is a hindrance.
so when I'm breathing in and out, I mean, I can notice my body, I can notice sounds, or like at least these can be like I can have them in
Sensory
mind.
input.
Yeah, so I
Yes.
can have sensory inputs. Um, Hindrances are a different quality, and those seem to pull me into either thinking about the past or the future. Um, is it okay to allow I mean, well, yeah, it's okay to allow the sensory inputs, at least where I'm at right now. I mean, I don't know. Like, it's okay to have those things going on. Like, I guess if I'm allowed to allow things in the moment, just maybe not things that are out of the moment. Is that true to say?
Okay. Yeah, now we're cooking. Exactly right. Yes, sensory input. What is it that you are, um, what makes you real? What makes you alive? Why are you alive? I mean, you're not just a piece of dead wood. Though when people are full of hindrances, they start to look and appear sometimes like a dead piece of wood or maybe one on fire. But
Hmm.
in any case, the whole quality about being alive is to be in this moment.
Hmm.
That part of the reason why we actually want to take a deep breath, not the only reason, because we've already discussed the issue of the anchoring of the mind to the breath, but we also know that through deep breathing that we energize the body. We know all about science enough. See, the Buddha didn't know about science in that way.
Hmm.
But Buddhism and the teaching of the Buddha is definitely scientific, all based upon empirical observations. And that the Buddha was not very big on magical beliefs, which magical beliefs are beliefs in things that we don't have evidence for, that we're looking for real evidence. And our evidence is gathered through our sensory input. So the things you can see, the things that you can hear, the things you can touch, the positions of your body, not just the tactile sensations on the outside, but there's a deep proprioceptive system built into the body so that you can close your eyes, move your body around, and while the eyes are closed, you know every position of the body. For instance, looking at the screen, just think about your left hand and notice where all of the fingers are. You know exactly where the fingers are. How do you know that? That's not tactile, that's proprioceptive. That there's an inbuilt system into the body that shows you, for instance, as part of your balance,
Hmm.
as part of our uh, cent- dealing with our center of gravity and where the gravity is, and all of that stuff happens outside of the thinking of the mind, but you can start to pay attention to it. That in fact you know where your body is, but you never pay attention to the fact that you know where it is.
So it feels like sometimes that like my ego kind of fills up that space that I think my body's at, or like where my attention's at. Kind of feels like I don't know, I kind of guess my sense of self brushes up against where I would expect like the proprioception or like my sense of my body should be. And it
Hmm.
seems like there's almost like an overlay on top of that where, it's really hard to notice those subtle feelings when, um, my mind's racing around and I'm thinking about like the past or the future.
That is, in fact, one of the primary mistakes that humans make is they make that conclusion that I am the body. This is me, where in fact the body is not you.
Hmm.
We'll go into a little bit more of that later when we start to look at these aspects of um, anapanasati that look at the four foundations of mindfulness. We then look at that through the situation of the five aggregates, because the five aggregates is taking us closer and closer to what the mind really is and how it works.
Hmm.
Eventually, then we come to understand how the mind works by practicing anapanasati. That anapanasati and the four foundations of mindfulness wake us up to see various things that are in the mind. So the very first waking up that we need to do is the waking up to clean the mind out of the hindrances,
Hmm.
which actually means then, as you were saying, thoughts about the past. If you're thinking about the past, then that's a hindrance to being in this present moment. If you're thinking about the future, then that's being a hindrance to being satisfied and content in this present moment. Going back to the analogy of being out in the wilderness with all of our luggage, what is our thought? Our
The
thought
stuff
is
sure
to
is
get
heavy.
home. Huh?
Yeah. Or the stuff sure is heavy. Or like, yeah, better get home.
Yeah, I want to get home. Well, now that we get home, in fact, we were already at home because this is all a mental exercise anyway.
Hmm.
But the mentality is no, I'm not at home. No, I've got a job to do. No, I've got all of this burden to take care of. But the reality is that no, I can just drop that burden and be relieved that I'm home wherever I am. The here now becomes our home.
And that's what we're learning with
Right.
Anapanasati.
And that's what we're learning with Anapanasati is to come out of the past, come out of the future, come out of our wanting things, come out of our being disgusted with things, come out of our tiredness, come out of our confusion, come out of our doubt, and I just named them all, into a state of happiness,
Hmm.
into a state of, I don't need to feel any of that way. You see, we feel that way because we're in the habit of feeling those ways. These hindrances were built up from childhood and been reinforced as um, bad habits. And the hindrances themselves can manifest, though they're in these five classes, they can manifest themselves as purely thought, even uh, thought that can be very heavy or grinding in, or it can be the kind of thoughts that just float around. Or a hindrance can be a feeling, and it can be a feeling of mild dissatisfaction, or it can be in the form of something big like anxiety or anger or grief, sadness, and most deeply of all is the feeling of fear. And that when a student is sitting in the meditation hall, it's a fairly safe place. There is not a barroom brawl going on in the meditation hall. There's
Yeah, you
no
don't
guns, there's no knives, there's no bombs, there's no politicians.
you can expect the walls not to fall down on you.
And you
You know,
expect,
it's like a safe place
exactly,
to be.
it's a safe place. And yet, when the average new meditation student goes in and sits down in that very safe place, the one thing they do not feel is safe.
Yeah, I
They
agree.
feel
That's my
confused.
experience.
They don't know what to do. They think that they're on the spot. Nobody's put them on the spot. The feeling of being on the spot was something that they felt from childhood, because the parents will put the kid on the spot, expecting him to perform for the pleasure of the adult. Well, that
Mhm.
happens in our own mind too. We expect ourselves to perform. Okay, so here that new student is sitting in the meditation and he's anxious and he's uptight and he doesn't know what to do. But while his mind is there, that parent is telling him, oh, we'll do this or do that or this or that and the other thing. It's good now for us to become aware of all of these orders that we give ourselves as passing thoughts through the mind.
That's really interesting because it's like when you sit down and even when you first start trying to focus on the breath, there's still, it's not like you're getting pulled away by hindrances, like the hindrance is already there. And
Hmm.
that we kind of have to parse that out as we go along.
Hmm. Exactly so. So, in this regard, um, in the beginning, we have to take a little bit of control of the mind in the sense of waking up to recognize, oh, the mind has wandered away from the breath. And then we come back and we take a deep breath. That deep breath then is now our only full, real, solid control that we're taking on. That most
Hmm.
of us feel like we're out of control in our lives, and taking control of the breath is the first thing that we can do. We can take control of it by taking a deep breath. It's actually quite easy to do, and to take, and then let it out as a sigh. Ah, that's actually quite easy to do.
I guess like technical question, should I be like letting it out as a sigh, like out of my mouth or out through my
Yeah.
nostrils?
Well, breathing in is better to do with uh, uh, the breathing in through the nostrils because of all the anatomy that's there.
Hmm.
Cleaning the air, warming the air, to where mouth is an alternate because of all of the stuffiness that can happen in the nose. But when we do breathe in with the mouth, then the mouth gets dry. We take in moisture from the mouth into the lungs that shouldn't be there or don't need to be there. That
Hmm.
in fact we want to breathe, if we could do it this way, breathing into the nose and out through the mouth, or out through any way at all, but out through the mouth is more healthy than breathing in and out through the mouth, because we want the lungs to actually empty themselves of excess moisture, carbon dioxide, um, microscopically sized uh, broken down molecules. For instance, adrenaline breaks down into the blood and then is normally expelled through the lungs, and if not, it's taken care of through the kidneys. One of the things that I have felt recently because of coronavirus, putting two and two together, is that I think that a lot of kidney problems that people have in their lives is because they're not breathing well. And because they're not breathing well, they're putting extra job on the kidneys to do the cleaning that their lungs could be doing for them instead.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I guess I didn't know that we expel anything other than like gases, or hadn't thought much about that. So
Uh-huh.
as long as we're doing deep breaths, I guess like it doesn't matter. Out breath is either out through the nose, out through the mouth, just as long as
Does,
we're emptying.
doesn't really matter. But we
Cool.
want
Okay,
to breathe in through the nose if we can because that will prevent all of the moisture of the mouth getting sucked into the lungs.
that makes sense.
Okay. So with that breathing in and out like this, we're actually learning to control the breathing. Now let's go back to the mind. If we can work together with the feelings and the mind, by saying, I see you, Myra, and out you go. Now we're cleaning the space in the mind to have the kind of thoughts that we would prefer to have.
Mhm.
And so at this point, I'll introduce the concept of wholesome and unwholesome thoughts and put the hindrances, all of them, into the qualification of unwholesome thoughts. And then there would be the qualification that we call wholesome thoughts. Now, here's how we define what is a wholesome thought and what is not a wholesome thought. The wholesome thought is going to help you stay in the calm, happy state that you're in to help you develop that state. And an unwholesome thought is like a hindrance that's going to pull you out of that state.
Okay, so
Okay, go ahead.
I, okay, so when we met like 3 weeks or 2 weeks ago, talked for the first time, you were like lion. You were talking about like lion attitude. I was
Hmm.
like, okay, when I was sitting down to meditate, I was like, okay, what would that feel like? And I recalled like some thoughts in my life where I felt kind of accomplished, or not accomplished, but like I felt like I did something really cool. Like I used to be real into kayaking, so I was like, oh yeah, I just like went
Yeah.
down that waterfall.
Uh
So it's
huh.
like, oh, that felt really good. And then so it's like, would that count as like a wholesome thought, or
Yes,
like, okay,
absolutely, because it brings you into a wholesome state of mind. Yes, I would recommend that for students. That if you can remember a time in your past that was very joyful or very rewarding for you, and that you liked that state, then sure, remember that thought so that you can put yourself back into that state,
yeah,
rather
it
than
seemed to
remembering
trickle.
all of those thoughts that make you feel bad. Because if you cracked up in that kayak, let's say that you had 10 good kayak trips and then you cracked up. 5 years later, you're going to remember that crack up and you're going
Yeah.
to not remember the 10 good trips that you did have.
Hmm.
Another example is the kid's writing on the wall. He's been writing on the wall for 10 minutes and he's really enjoying himself. Mom comes in and she sees him writing on the wall and she scolds him and makes him feel bad. He'll remember now not all the fun he had writing on the wall. He'll now remember getting picked on.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a survival technique that we have. You can see that that's natural for us because our whole point is staying alive. The kid learns don't write on walls, that's dangerous.
Hmm.
And he doesn't remember writing on walls is a lot of fun.
Yeah. He remembers it's like, no, I'll get scolded and like no
Exactly.
good.
Okay. So, in this regard, we tend to remember the bad things that happen to us.
Hmm.
So, intentionally remembering the good things so that we can feel good along that way is an okay thing to do.
Hmm.
But the wipeout or the mom scolding the kid for writing on the wall, that's something that we don't want to bring into meditation.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to recall that time you like got a bad grade on that exam or something and you felt really bad. You want to replace it with something that's like not in the realm of hindrances.
Right. But mostly we want to take that remembrance of the kayaking into the feeling that you had at the kayaking right now. And now that in this present moment is the object of the meditation is how you're feeling. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, it felt yeah, I wouldn't try to like dwell on that, but yeah, it's like okay, yeah, I noticed that feeling. It's like okay, that's a good feeling.
Uh-huh.
And then it kind of stuck around like yeah, and I could like go back to the breath, do some breathing and then yeah. So
Now, Now, some people who are listening to this, they just heard me, and then they'll say, "Wait a minute! I thought you said making the breath as your object of meditation and the anchoring and all of that." And now you're saying no, other things are to be the object of meditation. And the answer to that is within that 10 or 12 seconds that it takes for that cycle of the breathing, we have lots and lots of time, and the mind is very fast. So we can, in fact, during that time, we can do kind of a quick inventory. Like
Hmm.
while I'm breathing in and breathing out, how do I feel? What's going on? Check things out. Do I, what kind of thoughts am I having? And then we can throw those kind of thoughts that are not good out and keep the wholesome thoughts. So the kind of thoughts that we would immediately consider wholesome. And this is something that I want you to experiment with. What's wholesome and unwholesome for you? I can only give you indications of that. You've got to figure this stuff out for yourself. Okay. So what is wholesome would be the kind of thoughts that have to do with the here now. What's going on around you right now? The kinds of thoughts that are unwholesome would be the kind of thoughts that are not here or now, but in the past and the future, wanting things we don't have, trying to solve arguments that we've had in the past. Those are the kind of thoughts then that we're going to draw a line and say, no, those thoughts we're going to shove out when we catch them, and we're going to come back with our breathing and with our ability to think the kind of thoughts that we want to think.
Hmm.
Now, if we go deep, what people begin to say a deep, deep meditation in the sense of the correct practice, we will not be able to box in, hem in, hold in the mind down to one or two words and then get it to completely go quiet. If we can't do the simple job of deciding which thoughts are going to be wholesome and which are going to be not wholesome, and not
Hmm.
only that, but that wholesome versus non-wholesome is something that we can live by. To where deep jhanas, people are not walking around in deep jhana. They just don't do it.
Dang. Okay, I thought that's what I was going for.
Yeah, that we want the kind of meditation that really transforms our whole life, not
Yeah,
something that only gives us value while we're squatting on the floor.
exactly.
And so we don't necessarily need then to develop these really, really deep states. What we need to develop is to be here now, immediately, happily, quickly.
Okay, and we
And so
do that. Oh,
these are the
sorry.
skills to be developed.
Hmm. So I'm looking at, letting letting in like wholesome thoughts versus it reject or not letting in unwholesome thoughts. I'm
Hmm.
looking at when I notice a hindrance, casting it out by saying, "Aha, I see you," and then I'm focusing on the breath to bring me into the here and now because that is wholesome. Like the here and now is wholesome,
Hmm.
and getting a better understanding of like feeling of, I guess, my body, like the senses, like sensory inputs versus, you know,
That's
projecting into
six,
the
right,
future,
right.
projecting
The
in the
one that's
past.
up here is the one um, within Buddhism. They normally refer to it as six sense doors. There are six. There
Hmm.
is the tactile, and they don't make a distinction between tactile and proprioceptive, but we have the sense, we have olfactory, we have taste, we have eyes, and we have ears. And then we have good old number six, which is mental. Now, a
Hmm.
lot of people say, oh, yeah, I know about all the five, but I don't know about the mental. That means because I don't know about it, it must be really highly special. No, the mental is in fact the problem, is because we spend far too much time in the sensory input that's based upon digging in the past and building things in the future. Our ideas, our illusionary, our magical thinking, all of that comes out of that sixth sense.
Hmm.
But the five senses are real.
There's a different quality, a much different quality.
Okay. So later, when we get into teaching how the mind works through Paticca Samuppada, we'll see how that actually has a value to it. But
Hmm.
in the stage of practice where you are now, recognizing that, oh no, I actually do have the ability to decide whether the thoughts are the past or the future or outside of where I am now, as opposed to what's happening right here, right now.
Hmm.
Now, there's another group of wholesome thoughts that I will tell you about, and those are the kind of thoughts that would have to do with things that are timeless. Timeless things like noble things, okay, like this is suffering. But in fact, when we say this is suffering, the thought of this is suffering is generally because we're looking at hindrances. And so we begin to apply the Four Noble Truths through our thought process. This is suffering. Or when we get into the third noble truth, when we can relax and have a deep sigh, then we can remind ourselves, yeah, this is third noble truth. This is it.
By timeless, do you mean like unvarying, like kind of constant?
Well, the truth itself is noble in the sense that there has, as long as there's been humans, there has been human suffering.
Hmm.
As long as there have been humans, there have been times when a human didn't suffer.
It's like a, yeah, okay, it's a truth.
It's a truth, exactly. It's a noble truth because it's always there. And so this is something, for instance, when we begin to figure out personality view, like who am I? We're not talking about it like who am I from a past or a historical perspective, but rather what is the quality of being a me right now?
Hmm.
Okay, so we can in fact incorporate more noble things into our wholesome in the sense of the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Noble Path, the teachings of the Buddha, the thoughts about right effort are better than thoughts about Aunt Susie, thoughts about Sati, thoughts about right attitude. The very things that I have been talking about, Ben, are the noble things that you should be able to talk to yourself about also, because
Yeah, okay.
they're exhilarating, they're liberating, it makes you feel really good. I can do this third noble truth. Aha, Nirvana, I got it.
Yeah, they're based off of like a foundation or like a truth or like something that's, timeless, like you're saying.
Exactly.
Are the I guess like I tried meditating on the Brahma Viharas a long time ago. I guess like particularly like compassion, and it felt kind of different. I'd almost say it felt kind of timeless. Are those like kind of a reflection of the Four Noble Truths in any way?
Yes, the just a tiny short history.
Oh, yeah,
The
sorry
Brahma
if it's too much to.
Viharas existed before the time of the Buddha. Many people practiced the Brahma Viharas because everyone was looking for um, liberation, moksha, freedom. Uh, and people did the jhanas, people did the austerities, and people did metta Brahma Vihara meditations. And none of these were satisfactory, according to the Buddha. He was looking for something even more than that.
Okay.
But once he found out what was real, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Noble Path, he then brought in and incorporated these other things into his system, so that the Brahma Viharas he made more complete. If someone practiced Brahma Viharas in and of themselves and on their own, then they can gain some value to it, but it's not going to be completely liberating.
That makes sense. They're like maybe an aspect, but not the whole truth.
Right. It's a very beautiful tool. An example of that would be training wheels on a bicycle. Training wheels will help you really get started in riding a bicycle. But if you're going to ride Tour de France, you're not going to have training wheels on your bicycle.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, thanks for that, and thanks for that information. Yeah, it sounds like they're, um, yeah, just not the whole picture. They're part. I mean, they're like an aspect of Buddhism, or they're like an aspect of the truth, but like not. You can't
Okay.
gain everything from them.
So metta has to begin at home. Like I said, I don't want to give you a great long detail about it. We can talk in detail later on this. But
Yeah,
you can
sorry for the
think
tangent.
of metta as, aha, I see you, Mara. That's a kind of metta.
That's okay. Sorry, I have one last question. So,
Okay.
like the aha, like it's a kind of aha. It's not like a you're awful, like get out of here. It's like a meta aha, like aha, I
It's
see you.
a it's a metta aha, right?
Okay.
It's like a friendly older brother as opposed to a nasty parent or teacher.
Yeah, when he
It's
was sitting under
kind,
the Bodhi tree, he didn't whack him away with a stick. He was like, aha, I see you. Like,
yeah, aha, I see you.
yeah.
Exactly, exactly. Aha, I see you. Very friendly. But in fact, everything that we practice has to do with friendship. To become friends with your hindrances, to know them, to chase them away like naughty little children,
Hmm.
or gnats that we kind of brush away like that. We don't hate gnats when they come.
Hmm.
Some people do. But when your heart's full of joy, they're just there. And okay, so let me sweep them out of the way. All right. So the hindrances, and most specifically, to learn to become friendly to our instincts, because
Hmm.
the hindrances come out of the instincts. So that part of you that brings up fear, we don't want to kill that part of it. What we want to do is to manage it so that fear comes at the appropriate times, not with false positives.
Great.
Okay, it's like a pet dog that's barking too much. You want to go check out what the dog is barking about and then tell the dog, call him off and tell him, down boy, down boy. But we don't want to kill the dog.
Yeah,
We
we're not
want to
locking them
train
up.
him.
We're just building a
Not
better relationship with them.
exactly. And so when we build a deeper, better relationship with ourselves, that's metta. When we begin to develop right noble view, which is the basis of the Eightfold Noble Path, one's right noble view is to expand our viewpoint to include other people within our view so that we don't see me and him, we see us.
Just like if you had anger towards, if you feel anger rising within yourself, you're not going to like beat it up or anything. Or if you think somebody else did a bad thing, you would
Mhm.
just give them kindness. You would be like, I really wish out of like the deepest part of my heart that you would be well, as opposed to,
Right. Another aspect that we can look at is that uh, compassion is not the same as because he feels bad, I'll feel bad too in unison with him. It's no, he feels bad and I understand deeply how he feels. I've been there, done that, but I'm not going to feel that way now.
Mhm.
Because if I feel that way now, then it's not compassion I have for him, it's pity. In the sense of the rich old lady giving the dollar to the hobo, not because she's trying to help the hobo, it's because she's trying to get rid of the hobo.
Mhm. It's
So
just
this,
like, yeah, you're giving it to him to like keep him out of sight
yeah,
versus, no, let
uh-huh.
me like let me help you out. Here's a blanket, like let me invite you to my home or something like that.
Because through that compassion, basically what we need to see happen is to cheer them up rather than us joining their feelings. And the same thing with mudita is that many people see it in the sense of, if two people, if I want a job and this other guy that I'm working with wants the job because our boss is getting a promotion and one of us is going to get his job, and the other guy gets the job, right?
Hmm.
Normally, the individual me is going to feel bad, feel jealous, feel resentment. which means now we're setting up to destroy the relationship with my new boss, my competitor.
Yeah.
But if I can take him out to supper, if I can congratulate him profusely in front of everybody else, and the next morning bring in donuts and that kind of stuff, then that's going to fit me in really close and good with him, right?
Yeah, you want to be genuinely happy for him, not even just like the trappings of that either.
Right. Now, that's normally the way that Karuna is taught, but I'm going to give you the upside down of that. And that is that it's our job to be happy whether he gets the job or not. And let us
Okay.
say that a third person got the job, and now you and he feels bad, but now I can go and cheer him up. Mudita is not me trying to get my good joy out of someone else. My job with mudita is to go spread my new joy that I found through meditation.
So it's joyful for them to, regardless of the circumstance almost.
Yeah, because you don't have to feel bad. I can't think of any circumstance that requires you to feel bad.
Okay, yeah. So if they get the job, awesome. If they don't get the job, well, hey, that's great too. You'll find something else
Oh, hey, I'm good without it.
good without it.
I
Yeah.
was good to go without it. Then I wanted it and I felt bad, and now I don't get it. I'm going to continue to feel bad, or I'm
Or like,
going back to the state of awesome. I'm okay without it.
okay, yeah. So it's like there's an independence of the outcome there.
hmm
Regardless of the outcome, I'm happy for you.
Exactly. And in fact, when I say I'm happy for you, that's almost always a social uh, white lie. If you genuinely feel happy for the guy, he'll know that without you having to tell him.
Yeah, they'll know by like how you act.
Mhm. So the last one, upeka, is translated as equanimity, and the way that I describe that for students is that it's like sea legs.
Hmm.
That we 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 tend to want stability in our lives, which means we kind of want our ship docked. But a sea captain on a small yacht, he can go all over that ship while the waves are going back and forth. He's got no trouble. But a landlubber who goes on board that yacht, he's going to be sick. When the rock goes this way, he's going to go all the way over. He may even fall over the side. He just doesn't have the stability yet. Okay. Guess what? Life is like that. Life is like being at a ship at sea during some sort of uh, gale.
Yeah, and
And we need to learn to have our sea legs because anything can happen. Anicca is going to come.
yeah, you don't just want to get like tossed around on the boat all the time. Yeah, you want to
Exactly. So we
have your
don't want
sea
to be tossed
legs, be able to
around
ride the
on
waves.
the boat on board our ship of life.
Yeah.
If whatever happens to that ship of life, we're going to maintain our equanimity, or we're going to keep our balance, our sea legs, mentally. But you can also see that the Brahma Viharas are actually more social, to where Anapanasati is more individual within one's own mind.
Yeah, that makes sense. They're more outward
So in that
focused.
way, then you could say that Anapanasati is the method whereby we can actually put into use and into service the Brahma Viharas without having to have a specific practice of Brahma Viharas. The Brahma Viharas are almost kind of the outcome of proper Anapanasati practice.
We can make through Anapanasati, we can make ourselves the target of the Brahma Viharas.
hmm In other words, where's your joy? If you're going to go out there spreading your joy, where is it? You got some?
Yeah, you
Yeah, I
gotta
got
have it
some.
yourself.
I got some joy. Let's go spread.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to have it before you can spread it.
Exactly. Exactly. So this is the practice of Anapanasati, is getting that joy, coming out of those hindrances, finding a beautiful state of mind to be in. And now, through the Brahma Viharas, we can share that state of mind with others. As
Hmm.
opposed to the opposite was when I'm in hindrance and any old bad person, let's say any old person who comes along that's in some sort of bad mood, they'll put me in that bad mood too. Because why? I'm not mindful. I'm not watching what's going on. But
Yeah.
if someone comes who's in a bad mood and I'm in a joyful mood, then I'll see it as my task to bring him into my joyful state.
I think that's a really good way of looking at it. Yeah, you have your sea legs, or like, yeah, you're able to like ride the waves of like whatever, they're bringing to the table. And then you also want to project that and expand it to them.
Excellent. All right. So let's go ahead and finish this conversation
Yeah.
now and give you a chance to go and practice this more. Now that we
Yeah, have
talked
a ton to
about
work on.
the five hindrances, now you say, okay, now I know what they are, and my job is to stay out of that and stay into the present moment so that I feel like that I'm out of jail, I'm out of the hospital, I'm out of work, I'm out of debt, and I'm out of travel.
Great. Yeah, I think I have a very clear goal. Thank you.
All right, Clinton, we'll see you.
Yeah, see you later. Have a good evening.